All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So my name is Hudson Samuels. I'm a junior software engineer at Repairify, and I'm also the president of Makerspace. So I'm an alum of UT Dallas, and all of these presentations in this workshop series actually will be given by UT Dallas alum. So just want to say welcome, and hopefully everybody's enjoying the pizza. Just while you guys are eating, before you get your hands all over your keyboards, I'm going to go through a little bit of some of the introductory steps as well as what Repairify is. So this is going to be our agenda for today. We'll start by sort of going through what our company does. Then after that, we'll start by setting up Node.js. For those of you that don't know, it's just a JavaScript engine that'll help run our code today. After that, it'll be setting up the template, just downloading it from GitHub and then getting it up and running. After that, we'll go through assembling the blog. That'll be actually putting together all the different code and whatnot so that it's in a functional state. Then we'll just do a quick conclusion, going over what everybody's learned today and how you can sort of build on top of this basic blog that we're creating. And then after that, we'll be doing a quick resume review so everybody can go through with some professionals and get your resume judged. So real quick, I want to go through what Repairify is. So our company does remote diagnostics, and we basically help in the collision field. So we have a bunch of different tools and brands like Aztec, Blue Driver, and more. I personally work on a core team where we sort of develop a system that remote technicians from our company can use to assist technicians in the field. But yeah, so I'll kind of quickly jump into the actual workshop portion. So we'll go ahead and get started with that. So to briefly explain Node.js, it's basically a JavaScript runtime for servers. So JavaScript is used in a variety of front-end, back-end applications. For example, it can run in your browser, or it can run from a server to power things like APIs or Discord chatbots, pretty much anything. It's used by many large companies such as Amazon, PayPal, Reddit, and many, many others. And it's definitely one of the most popular tools for building pretty much anything like applications, frameworks, you name it. So everybody should have received my email talking about how to set up either Xcode if you're on Mac or WSL if you're on Windows. Did anybody not get that email or not complete those steps? All good? All right, perfect. So these are some brief steps so we can go ahead and get started with Node Version Manager. So what this tool is it's a version manager that'll allow you to manage different versions of Node.js. So that way, if you're working on different projects that have different dependencies, you can really easily manage those different versions and not have to reinstall the program over and over and over. So for Mac, Linux, and WSL users, it should be everybody in the audience as long as you followed my email. If you're on Windows, go ahead and open WSL. You'll want to make sure you follow all of these instructions in that Ubuntu or whatever distro you went with terminal. So first off, if you're on Mac, you should have installed Xcode already. This is a pretty long process. This can take like 15 minutes or more. So if you haven't already, go ahead and do this now. Xcode basically bundles a lot of different development tools together, like Git, for example, which we'll need to download the project and its dependencies tonight. Once you've done that, we'll go ahead and go to the GitHub link here. I know it's a bit long. If it's more convenient for you, you can scan this QR code and like share it with yourself on Discord or send it directly to your computer if you have a way to do that. This website has the NVM tool available for console. So this will basically allow you to very easily use an installer and just set this up. If you are on Windows and did not follow the WSL instructions that I emailed, you can go ahead and go to the GitHub link on the right. Again, if you have WSL installed per my email, please use the instructions on the left. But if you don't have it, there is NVM Windows, and you can go ahead and follow the instructions there to download the setup tool. Thing is with Windows, if you do go that route, there is a chance that the project won't work tonight. Certain React frameworks, including Gatsby, can be a little bit finicky on Windows. So most developers do use some sort of WSL distro, which is what we've tested this with. So I'll give you guys a few minutes to go ahead and get that set up. So now that you have NVM installed, we're going to go ahead and install Node and Gatsby. So now that you have the version manager, you still need to install Node itself, right? So if you're using WSL or some other terminal that you can go ahead and close and reopen, please do so. What you did just run, set some path variables, so you'll be able to run NVM without having to type out the whole file path. So once you've restarted it, this command should go ahead and work. If you run NVM, it should bring up some stuff with like different colored text and a few command help information statements. But if you're running into trouble getting that working, just let me know after I'm done with this slide and I'll help you out with that. So once you have your terminal open, like I mentioned, just run NVM, make sure it's installed correctly. And then next you'll want to go ahead and install version 20.11. You can see the commands right there that you'll need to run. First, you'll install it, and then you'll go ahead and type in nvm use and the version number. So that way you're set up using the right one. You shouldn't have to do this, but this is just in case somebody else or somebody already has a different version of Node on their machine. So once you're done with that, you should be able to go ahead and install Gatsby. I'll explain what Gatsby is in just a moment. That's the React framework we'll be using. Make sure you include that -- global at the end there. The reason we include that is so that way Gatsby can be run at the terminal level without having to be in the project. So this will allow us to run commands like the develop command, where we can actually see our changes live in the browser. Okay, we're going to go ahead and continue. Nobody else needs help, right? All good? All right, perfect. So we're going to go back to explanation mode here for a minute or two. So what Gatsby is a React-based static site generator. So I know that sounds like a lot of like techie, like buzzwords, for those of you that don't know what a static site generator is. But to put it very simply, it's basically taking files of one type and turning it into a static website. So what do I mean by that, right? So today in our example, we're going to be taking markdown files, which is just like a simple text format, except you can add things like headers, italics, links, etc. And then we're going to be transforming that into blog posts on a website, which you will then be able to publish through a later workshop. But for now, we're just going to keep everything local, kind of show you how it works. And then hopefully by the end of this, you'll have enough knowledge of React to where you're able to sort of go in there, customize this blog, make it how you want, and build upon this in future workshops. So this is best for static sites with less pages. So what I mean by that is, let's say you have a website where you're just displaying a bunch of information or you have an interactive application, right? Unless you're doing something that's like this repetitive format, like creating a blog where you're going to have multiple posts that are similar in like site format, you'll probably not want to use Gatsby unless you're doing something like that. So if you want like an interactive site, definitely a different React framework. But this is a pretty good one if you're trying to do something like a blog. Let's see. Just gonna minimize that. All right. And there's many different types of websites you can create with it. Like I mentioned, just sort of these repetitive sort of gallery-like sites. So like if you want to make an art gallery, I personally have a portfolio website where I have a blog and a portfolio of different projects I've worked on, as well as just the basic blog we're creating today. It's used across the internet as well. I'm sure many of you have heard of like Linktree, for example. Many student organizations use that to like show all their social media together in a row. PayPal has their developer documentation all listed out using Gatsby. And Spotify actually made a whole website talking about how they design their application, and it's sort of in like a blog post style format. So they use Gatsby for that as well. All right, so next we're going to go into setting up the template. Last chance before I sort of start getting into the code part of things. Does anybody have any questions about the setups for the dependencies and everything we've worked on so far? All right. So we'll go ahead and start with downloading the template. So keep in mind where you download this, you will have to work out of. So pick somewhere that is a good permanent location for you if you can. I wouldn't recommend your downloads folder personally. If you have a developer folder, then that's a good option. Or really just any sort of folder where you'll be able to remember where this is. Because like I mentioned, we do want to sort of build off of this in future workshops. So making sure you have quick and easy access to this would be recommended. You'll want to go ahead and run this git clone command. I know it's very long, I apologize. But you'll basically just copy this into your terminal once you're in that root folder where you want to put your project. That will copy the entire project folder to your computer. After that, you'll go ahead and navigate to the project root in your terminal. So you'll just go inside of that Repairify blog template folder. After that, you'll go ahead and install your dependencies. So you'll go ahead and run that npm command there. That'll install all of your different packages and whatnot. So everything sort of works together and we'll be able to use the different tools we're working with today. And then you'll be able to run that Gatsby develop command. So that way everything is instantly reflected in your browser and you're able to sort of debug your code and work on it at the same time as you're actually changing the code. So again, I'll give a few minutes to set this up. This will be the last instruction where I'm kind of giving that awkward pause time. So again, if you have any questions, please let me know now. And then after that, we'll start getting into the bread and butter code of it. All right. So now we're going to jump into assembling the blog. So like I mentioned, this is going to be the very hands-on step. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. You'll just follow along with me as we sort of go through the template and build this out. We're going to go through a lot of different steps to get there. I've provided you with some basic styling and CSS to sort of build this out. But what we're going to create is a very, very simple blog. There's going to be enough styling that you sort of have an idea of how to use like headers and different CSS stylings to sort of build upon this. But as a reminder, this is really made for you to build on top of this, make the style your own, and learn a lot outside of just this workshop. So we'll go ahead and get started. Let's see here. So I should be able to. Okay. So this is our template. I have the exact same files as you. You'll notice I've just gone ahead and installed the node modules here. And I'll go ahead and run Gatsby. One second. All right. So you can see we're starting off with very, very basic, almost nothing, right? We're going to build off of this, and we're going to go ahead and show you how to make this list all of our different blog pages. You'll be able to write your own blog pages within Markdown and interact with those. So let's go ahead and get started. So first thing you'll notice is when you ran this, it went ahead and built two folders that you may be able to see. There's this cache folder. You don't need to worry about this. This is really just a cache for what Gatsby's been compiling for you, so you can see everything in the development build. And then there's also this public tab. You don't need to worry about this either. This is just sort of storing where different static information that Gatsby is relying on is. So the only folder we'll really be working with is the source folder. you can ignore these three. So I kind of want to just go through a few different files that I've included so everybody kind of has an idea of where we're starting from. So first off, if I go ahead and go through the Gatsby file, actually, I'll go through the package.json first. So this is a very simple package.json. All a package.json is saying like basic information about the application you're developing. So like, what's the app's name? What's the version? Who created it? What license is it under? And then the dependencies and different scripts that you can easily run through that package. So in our case, I've made a very, very simple, just basic package JSON based on what Gatsby provides by default. You can go ahead and customize this to your liking if you'd like. It won't break anything. And I recommend changing the author to your GitHub username or your name, whichever you'd like, just so that way you can, claim ownership, say this is yours. And yeah, this will come with pretty much every Node.js style project. Past that, we have a few files that Gatsby uses. So this Gatsby browser file, you don't really need to worry about this. I've just imported Roboto as a font for everybody to use. This is totally optional, but the main thing that's really important with this file is we're also using this to import our style file. So I've made a very basic CSS file that will import different styles for like your headers, your text, just give a little bit more styling than what you'd see in your default, like, monospace, or not monospace, like serif fonts, black text on white page, this will kind of give us a few things here. So for example, you'll notice that the text here is kind of cropped within a box here that's sort of invisible. If I go ahead and open inspect element and open that in a new window, you can see just as a general example that the body, I'll just leave my mouse on there. It has those yellow spaces on the side. Those are margins that will basically allow us to keep our page sort of similar looking on all devices. So even if I have like an ultra widescreen monitor, it'll still look the same width on that. And then that green space is padding. So we're basically adding a little bit of buffer room so the website isn't right along the edges there. So those are just a few examples of how CSS is going to be helping us and why I've included that in the project. We also have various like header stylings, for example. So you'll see if I go in here, you can see like this H1 has a color styled to it and some other information. I'm not going to go through the style CSS in this workshop just because it would be a lot of explanation of like CSS stuff that isn't super important at the moment that I'll go through the very basics anyway. But I did leave some comments throughout that file if you are curious, things like how I've customized the scroll bar so it doesn't look like the default one for your operating system, leaving colors as variables there so you don't have to enter a hex code every single time for a color, just things like that. So anyway, now that we've covered that file, we'll get into the Gatsby config. So Gatsby config, sort of similar to how package.json is in every single like Node.js JavaScript style project for the most part. Gatsby config is in every single Gatsby project. So what this does is specifies things like what Gatsby plugins are you using, what your site metadata is, just these sort of basic dependencies and whatnot. So to kind of go through these just very briefly, we'll be using styled components to build out some basic elements that we can reuse with certain CSS stylings. We'll be putting images within our markdown files, so we'll be able to use those using the Gatsby plugin image. We'll be using MDX files. So the key difference between regular Markdown and Markdown X is with MDX, you can actually add JavaScript elements within your Markdown. So I don't have an example of this on hand, but let's say, for example, you wanted to do like a gallery of images, right? That's not as simple as just putting in like an image file, right? You need like a whole specific element for that. So with MDX, you're able to basically import a gallery style element and then add in those images as like variables and whatnot, just like any other JavaScript React document. We'll be using Sharp to import some of our images. And then transformer sharp, I believe, will allow us to put those images directly within Markdown if we want to. Um, and it'll also allow us to have a little bit more control over the dimensions of those images. And then we also have a few things for our file systems. So first off, we have our pages here. All this really is saying, like, for example, what our index is, right? Just sort of mapping these to URLs. And then we also have our blog. So that's what this folder is here. What that'll do is it'll help us later with mapping the Markdown X files into rendered HTML by Gatsby. And then this section, Gatsby node, this is used for whenever we're creating nodes using our different files. So we'll actually be going through some GraphQL, which will allow us to basically query for these blog posts that we create, gather the information from them, and display them on that front end. And then just to sort of very briefly cover these, we have a few component files that I've left mostly empty. For example, this spacer, I've just left like a little comment there. And then we have our pages. These pages will help us with just adding that information directly to the website as like a static page that we're not going to be really importing information into. And then our blog page template. So what this template will allow us to do is we'll take the Markdown information from the Markdown file, and we'll just put it directly into that blog page. So you'll see here, this is just a very basic placeholder right now. There's nothing to really use here, but we'll get into that. So does anybody have any questions about sort of like the layout of these files or anything that I may not have covered and you're a little confused about? All right, cool. So in that case, I will go ahead and get us started. So first thing I want to go over real quick is our sample blog post. So this is just a random picture I took in Colorado, and then I've just made like a very basic Markdown file. So to kind of explain how Markdown works, there's metadata at the top. So we can store things like what's the title of our blog post, what date was it created, and then the image that we want to use for the preview. So I've just put a little file path there. And then we can put any text we want beneath this section here. So you can see I just put, this is an example MDX file, and then a little guide for Markdown formatting. I highly recommend you check this out. I'll go through some basic Markdown here in a few minutes, and you'll get the basic idea of how this works. But really all it is just adding little things like if you've used Discord before, you may know that you put like asterisks before and after to like bold or italicize your fonts, right? Same thing here. Discord actually uses a lot of Markdown syntax. So you'll be able to sort of use the same syntax that you use in like Discord or Slack to change your fonts and whatnot here. So for starters, we want to go ahead and configure our Gatsby project so we actually have those blog posts rendered, right? We want to be able to take those and store them so GraphQL can sort of go through them and process them into pages, right? So how are we going to do that? If I go ahead and open the Gatsby node here, we'll go ahead and start up top here. So when we're creating a node, which is basically like a reference to a file in terms of Gatsby, right? We want to save that node with some specific information for us. So in our case, we want to find all Markdown files, and then we want to save them so that way we're able to access them later with the information we have. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, perfect. So I've left this create node field action here for you. This onCreate node is basically a function provided by Gatsby, which is run whenever the site starts up. So we'll go ahead and build on top of this. So first thing we want to do, like I mentioned, we only want Markdown files, right? Because that's what our blog posts are going to be. So we're going to start by making an if statement where we're going to check if the node type, which you can get by node.internal.type, and then we're going to check if it's equal to an MDX file, which is that Markdown type that I mentioned earlier. Can everybody see, by the way? Does anybody need me to zoom in? Zoom in a little? Okay. Yeah, you can use quotes or anything really. Is this better? Okay. So this will allow us to filter to just those markdown files that we want, right? So now we'll go ahead and save that path into a value. So how we're going to do this is we're going to use the create file path method imported up here from the Gatsby file system. And then we're going to provide that function with some information. First, we're going to provide the node that we're working on, so it can modify that. Then we're going to provide get node, so it has information on how we can refetch that information if we need to. And then we're going to add a base path of pages. And what that'll do is create a sort of temporary file from Gatsby's point of view where it's like, oh, hey, I recognize this blog post as a page, right? And then we'll go ahead and create a field. So what a node field is basically some information that we can store within that node. So what we're going to do is create what's called a slug. So in our case, a slug is basically the relative URL of the blog post. So I'll go ahead and do create node field. And that's that method we imported here. And we're going to pass in following information. First, we want to set the name to slug because that's the variable we're going to use. We're going to pass in the node that we're using. And then we're going to set the value to value. Now, for those of you that know what string interpolation is, you're probably like, why don't I just set value to value, right? So the reason we're doing this actually is because if you come back to this project and you're like, hey, I want to add more than just a blog, right? Maybe you want to add like portfolio projects or something like that. You probably want this on a separate URL part, right? You want it on like, website.com/blog/ and then the page name, right? So what we can easily do is actually add /blog before this, and that would put everything within its own like blog folder on our website. Does that make sense? So I'm not going to do this for now. I'm just going to leave it directly on that root directory. So I'm just going to leave it as value. But in the future, if you'd like to change this, please feel free. I recommend leaving this as I have it right now, because otherwise you may run into issues later on when I'm like showing links and whatnot. So I would just leave this like this for now. Next, we're going to go to the query all markdown files part. So like I mentioned, we're going to use the GraphQL library to query all of our different files and sort of take the information from those files and render them into a website, right? So to quickly go over what GraphQL is sort of structured like, I'll write this query up and sort of narrate as I'm going along. So if I go ahead and I'll go ahead and create a query, let's call it blog slugs. So we're getting the URLs that we want to set up as well as the other information. Equals await. And the reason we put await is because we want to make sure that this method completes before we do anything else in this function. GraphQL, which is that library that I mentioned we're going to use. And then we're going to go ahead and import our query statement. So this is going to be like a lot of syntax, and it's not going to be appropriately highlighted. But like I mentioned, I'll narrate through this. You can kind of get an idea. So first, we're going to name our query blog slugs at the top here. And then we're going to go ahead and get all MDX files from it. So we're just going to go ahead and put all MDX here. And this is provided by one of the Markdown plugins that we're using. So you're able to just get that verbatim. You don't have to do any like specific file searching or anything like that. Then we're going to find those nodes that we referenced earlier, right? So we're going to put nodes here. And now we're a few layers deep, but to quickly go over what we're going to be getting here. First thing we want is the ID of the file, so we'll be able to reference what that exact file is, right? Then we'll want to go ahead and grab that slug field. So you can go ahead and put fields there, and then brackets, slug, because the slug field is saved within that field's object. So you need to make sure you query it just like that. Then we're going to go here to internal. And we're going to do content file path. And what that'll allow us to do is get that page file path that we created earlier when we were creating the node. So by querying all of this information, we'll be able to get basically all that information from the blog slug. And then we'll be able to resolve our post template and create our information there. So next, oh, sure. Can everybody see good? Okay, perfect. So now that we have these blog slugs queried, we're going to go ahead and iterate through these. We're going to import that blog post template, and then we're going to fill it with our markdown data. We'll get to the blog template here in a minute, but for starters, we're just going to loop through those files. So first, we're going to go ahead and do blog slugs, that query we created earlier, .data to get the data that we fetched from that query, .allmdx. You'll notice that we're kind of starting from here, and we're going to be working our way down to get these other fields, right? Because they're now imported as JavaScript variables that we can access. .nodes, so that's this level here. And then we're going to do a for each loop on this. So by doing this, we're able to go through each individual node and create that page for it. So we're going to go ahead and create a second set of parentheses in here, write in node. So node will be the object that we're going to read the information from. And then you're going to want to put in equals and then the greater than sign. It'll look like a little arrow like that, and it'll turn blue. Space, and then you'll want to put brackets around this. So this will be the full code we're going to run on that node object. So what we'll want to go ahead and start with is getting our template. That way we can actually fill it out with that markdown info, right? So we'll do const post template equals resolve. And what resolve will do is just find the file and allow us to use it, right? We're going to put parentheses there, and then put quotes or backticks. And then you're going to want to do dot. This will put us in the root directory /src. That puts us in our files that we'll be working with, our React files. Then we're going to do templates. This is where we're going to be storing the blog page template. And then blog-page.js. If you want to make sure you spelled that correctly, you can just go to your file management on the side and go ahead and open those folders, and you'll see it's right there. And then we'll go ahead and create the page for every blog post. I'm just going to copy that comment, move it in here. You don't have to do that. I'm just doing it for convenience. And then we're going to go ahead and create the physical page that our browser will be able to access. So for that, we'll go ahead and use the create page method. And we're going to provide it with all of our information that we've kind of created up to this point. So our path for the page will be the slug that we created earlier. So going back here, you can see we're in this all MDX part here, or sorry, this nodes part here. So we have all this information available within this node variable, right? So we're going to do node.fields.slug, and that'll get this variable that we set earlier so we can control where the page will end up. Then we'll want to go ahead and set the component. And we're going to go ahead and do some string interpolation. So make sure you read this carefully. First, you'll want to start with backticks. I meant to mention this earlier. I apologize. It's the key to the left of your one. There's a little like backtick symbol that looks like what I have up there. And then you'll want to go ahead and put a $sign and then brackets like that. What this will do is it'll allow you to put variables right within the string. So you don't have to do like string plus and then another string, right? And then we're going to go ahead and put that post template that we've imported here. And then we're going to do question mark underscore underscore. Let me just make sure I have that right. Yep. And we're going to do content file path. basically setting this within our URL that Gatsby will be referring to internally. And then we're going to do another string interpolation with $sign and then brackets again. Then we're going to do node.internal.content file path. And what this is saying is basically create a component using the post template and then taking the file path of the markdown that we're trying to generate into a page. Then we're going to do context. We're going to set our slug to that node field slug that we created above. You can just copy that if you want. And then set our ID so we have reference to that as well. So just node.id here. And this will just save some context so we can refer to this later if we'd like. And then go ahead and save. So if you don't already, I would highly recommend going to extensions here and installing Prettier. That's a formatter that works for JavaScript, so that way you can automatically format everything so it conforms to a standard. It's just kind of nice, so that way if you save, it automatically formats everything for you. You don't have to do that right now, just a recommendation for the future. But this is basically set up our page generation with these markdown files. So I'm going to go ahead and kill the Gatsby develop right now. You can do that with Control-C. And I'm going to go ahead and run it again, because whenever we change this Gatsby node file, this will actually not be reloaded into Gatsby. Sort of like environment variables, sometimes you just have to restart the software to get it to understand the new things you've added, right? So we're going to go ahead and do that real quick. Now, I may get some errors here. If we do, I'll explain why. Just going to wait a minute. All right, there we go. So I have some warnings here. These are just because we're defining something but never using it. Don't worry about that. As long as there's no errors, we're good. Everything should be tapered out in regards to warnings by the end of this. So if I go ahead and open my browser and refresh, you'll notice we don't have any blog posts there, even though we have the markdown file. We're going to be working that ourselves. But if I go ahead and go to localhost 8000/example post, like so, hit enter, there's an error, right? So reason being, in that blog page, I went ahead and imported some information from what should exist as a GraphQL query, so that way we see this error and we know, hey, something's wrong, right? We haven't finished building our blog page. We need to work on that. So let me go ahead and pull that up and I'll show you. So you'll see here, if I open our blog page, we're trying to get the title, the date, the image, all from the markdown file that we've created, right? But you'll notice we're not querying for that blog page anywhere, right? So how are we going to get that information? We have to run a query for that and pass that data into the blog page. That way we're able to work on it. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and start a query down here. We're going to export our query so that way Gatsby can see it and run it. Const, and I'll just name it query, equals GraphQL. You'll notice this is a lot similar to what we just did in that node file. And we're going to write something somewhat similar. So we're going to go ahead and name our query. I'm going to call this one blog page. Except you'll notice this time I'm putting parentheses here. So I'm actually going to specify our slug as a string. And the reason I'm doing this is if I go ahead and put this here, this will tell GraphQL, hey, we're provided a slug. We need to find that page, and that's what we're displaying, right? So go ahead and type this out, and then we're going to put brackets. And again, we're just going to add more information in here. So next, we're going to write MDX. This will get a single MDX file versus the all that we did earlier for a whole list. And then we're going to filter by the field slug. And be careful. I did put parentheses here and then brackets here. I know it's a little bit confusing, but just make sure you follow that notation exactly. So we want our slug, and we're going to specify that we want it to be equal using EQ to the slug we're providing. So this will provide us with the slug from our MDX file that we created in that Gatsby node file. And then we're going to use it here to compare and make sure we're getting the right page. Does everybody follow me on that? Perfect. So now we're in our MDX file. We need to query for our information so we can display that, right? So we'll start by getting our slug. So I'm going to go ahead and do fields slug, just so we have that. And now we're going to get the real meat of the document, which is our text. So if I go ahead and do front matter, this is going to be that metadata at the top of the MDX document that we showed earlier. And then brackets. So first thing we want, obviously, is the title. That's what we're going to display at the top and have as our tab name. So we're going to put that. Then we want the date, right? So we can display when the blog post was created. So we'll put date. Now, in GraphQL, you could sort of specify ways you want to process information. So in our case, let's say I want to format the date a certain way, right? The way I have it right now is this year, month, date sort of system, like you'd see in like European countries, right? That's not really the convention we follow. So let's say we want to format it differently. So we have like the name, so like January 23rd, 2024, something like that, right? If I go back here, I can put format string, colon, and then specify a format that I want it to follow. So in our case, and you can change this later if you'd like, I'm going to do 4 M's to say I want the full name of the month, so like January. 1D to say if the date is like the first or something, we're not going to put 01. We're not wanting like that full 2-digit date. We just want 1 digit if it's applicable. And then we're going to put quadruple Y for the year at the end here. Does everybody follow that and why we're doing it? Okay, perfect. Yeah, so it means the full word, like January. I think 3 M's is like an abbreviation, so like Jan, and then I think 2 is like the 2-digit representation, and 1 is just the 1 digit. So yeah, feel free to change this. As of right now, I don't think it should matter. It may matter when it comes to like unit testing or something in the future. So just keep in mind you may need to change this later if you do change it. And then finally, we're going to get the image that we're using so we can display it at the top of the page, right? So we're going to do image. And because of the Gatsby plugin we're using to process the image, we're going to do a little bit of typing here. We're going to get the child image sharp. This basically goes to the sharp plugin and says we want our manipulable image. And then we're going to say Gatsby image data. And then like we did with the date, we're going to change our information we're getting back a little bit by saying we want the layout to be full width. The reason we're going to do that is when we have the blog post up, I think I still have it on my PowerPoint. Yes. We want it to take up the maximum width. So that'll just automatically apply some CSS styling for us, make our lives easier. We'll go with that. Does everybody follow along up to this point? All right, we'll go ahead and save. And you'll notice a lot of stuff just blew by in our console, right? If I go ahead and go back here and refresh, we now have placeholder text. So this is just our very, very basic. We're going to work on putting our information in there now and really build out what our blog page is going to look like. So I'm going to go ahead and open our blog template and scroll up here to our return information. So what this return is basically saying, hey, browser, this is the HTML that I want to render. So I want you to show this to the user. So let's go ahead and delete our placeholder text. We're not going to need that. We're actually going to put the blog in, right? So first thing we're going to do is go ahead and put the image at the top here, right? So to do that, Gatsby provides a Gatsby image component that we can go ahead and use. So we want to do a opening Gatsby image. like so. It should already be imported for you at the top. I tried to make this so you don't have to import anything. You won't run into any import errors, but if you do, please let one of us know. And then we're going to specify some information. So first thing, we're going to say our image is equal to image dot child image sharp dot Gatsby image data. I know I kind of ran through that quickly. Reason being, if you go to the bottom here, you'll notice it's that exact same information we put here. So just that child image sharp Gatsby image data. And I'll leave it here for a moment so you can copy that too. Yeah. Before Gatsby image data here. Oh, this, that's a less than sign. Yep. And then after that, Gatsby image does require an alt. So what an alt is for those that need to use a screen reader, for example, when it's going through the page, it needs to have something that it can narrate, right? So we'll go ahead and just put the title of our blog post there. I highly recommend changing this in the future if you do need to make like a more accessible website. But for now, I'm just using this so we don't have to worry about it. And then we're going to go ahead and set a class name. So you can do class and then capital N name equals. And I'm just going to do blog dash image like so. So the reason we put class names is for a few reasons. First off, this allows you to easily target elements through things like CSS. But second off, this may be used for various purposes by people outside of your department. So for example, at Repairify, we do automation testing where we need class names and IDs and different information on objects. So that way the quality assurance developers can come in and say, hey, this is the object I want to click or interact with. And since they're able to target it through that, they're able to run their tests completely. You can technically target things without those IDs, but it's so much harder that, it takes 5 seconds. It's worth it to just try and add like a class name if it's a generic, or an ID if it's something you're just going to use once, or like something in a list with an ID. So we're just going to go ahead and put that there. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And you'll notice it's rebuilding our development bundle, and it's actually running an image processing job at the bottom here. So what that's doing is if I go ahead and open my Chrome again, you'll see our images here. So what that processing job is doing is basically taking that image and converting it so Gatsby can do a little bit of its magic with it. Basically, it will convert it to different like sizes, and it'll try and create like a very low res version of the image. So let's say somebody goes to your site, right? You want your website to load like that, right? You don't want it to take forever. So by loading a very, very small res image and then replacing it with this full res one long term like that, you can see it sort of flicker there. That allows Gatsby to load your pages very quickly and then just substitute that image later on once it's already loaded the main content. So, sorry. Oh,
Yeah, right.
the query? Okay. Sure. Does anybody else have any questions or anything so far? Yes.
Is the recording of this going to be uploaded somewhere?
Yeah, we'll probably be able to do that.
Okay.
And we'll also have like a complete template version as well. So if you need to, you can have access to the exact code we're writing today. So. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and yes. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Layout full width. Let's see. Yeah, these are parentheses. So if we're trying to like run a method, or we're trying to like get a more specific version of what we're looking for, we'll use parentheses. If we're trying to get like a child, you'll notice that it's indented most of the time. Sometimes we also use it to provide like a more detailed object up here. Does anybody else have any questions about the GraphQL query? All right, perfect. So I'm going to go back here, and let's just go ahead and put our title and date in right now. So I'm going to do H1. This means like the biggest header that HTML can render, right? And I'm just going to set a class name of blog title for the same reason we mentioned earlier. And then I'm going to do curly brackets here, like so, and put title. The reason we use curly brackets is it allows us to take the variables that are provided through JavaScript up here and use them in our HTML that we're trying to return down here. Does that make sense? All right, perfect. So we're just going to do the same thing with our date. So I'm going to do H3 for a slightly smaller header, class name blog date. And then we're going to do curly bracket date like that. And I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Now, if you go here, you'll notice we have no gap here, right? It's just the image and then our text. It doesn't look very appealing, right? You want a little bit of buffer space between the image and that text. So does everybody have this code, or does anybody need a second? Good. Okay. So if you open your components folder, there's the spacer file here. So to really quickly go through this, we're going to create what's called a styled component. This is basically a component that we can reuse, which is a modification of a existing HTML type. So in our case, for example, we're going to use a div, which is like the most basic HTML object you can pick. You can put really anything in this. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take a input of our height. So this will allow us to reuse the component in different ways. So if we wanted to have a spacer that's like this tall versus this tall, we can reuse that exact same component, which can be pretty helpful. So CSS, all it really is you just specify a variable name. So I'm going to do height and then colon and then like some sort of measurement or whatever you want to set it to. So I could do like 20 pixels, for example, right? But like I mentioned, we want to actually take in a variable and set that to the height, right? I'm going to delete this, and we're going to do some more string interpolation here. This time around, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put parentheses. We're going to take in props. So what props are for React elements are basically information that is passed into the React element. And then we're going to arrow function into props.size. What this will do is it'll take our props and get the size parameter, and then we're going to put that here. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to go back to blog page. So like I mentioned, we want a spacer between our image and our information here, right? So I'm going to go ahead and put our spacer. And then I'm going to set the size to 3 REM. What that means is like 3 standard units in web development. And save. And if I go back here, you'll notice there's now a space between our title and our image. So this gives it a little bit more of that space, so it looks a little more comfortable, right? Now I'm going to sort of blaze through these last parts because I've written most of this for you. You'll just have to import things or write out the imports that I've already given you. So first off, we're going to copy this spacer. We're going to put it again beneath the date. This will provide us a little bit of a gap between our metadata information and the actual content of the post. And then we'll want to go ahead and do content style. We're going to create a div with a class name of blog body. Like so. And then we're going to create an MDX provider. And we're going to put an object in here called children. What this will do is when this page is created by Gatsby node, the actual text of the file is provided as a child. So by putting this children here, we're basically able to take the information provided by our Gatsby node file and convert it into the full page. So if I go ahead and hit save, you'll notice we have our information rendered here, right? And just to show very quickly, if I go here and I go to our blog post, I can write like ABCD 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Save, go back here. You'll notice it updates automatically, right? So does everybody follow along right now? Anybody need me to go back? Okay. Yeah, sure. Does anybody need more time? Sure. Do you need help?
I'm not sure what.
Okay.
Something in here.
Let me see.
I got it. I assume it's. Spaces. Stories. Yeah, I would try to mention. We want to take it if you did.
Yeah.
Does the white space matter in GraphQL?
It shouldn't. No, I don't believe so. All right. If anybody needs to, please take a picture of this because I'm going to continue so we can get through this in time. Oh, yeah. The what? Sorry. Oh, sure. You want this part? Yeah, no problem. Yep. Sorry. Oh, sure. And we'll provide all the source code for this at a later point. So don't worry about it if you can't get all of this right now. You'll be able to complete this at a later time if it doesn't work out right now. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and continue just because we're a little bit short on time. So we're going to go ahead and start working on actually listing out our blog. So you'll notice we have our information here, right? What we actually want to do is display that on our blog homepage, right? So I'm going to go ahead and go back here to the root, localhost 8000. And you'll see there's not a list here, right? So let's go ahead and create that. If I go back to here, we're going to go to our pages folder here. We're going to do index. And then you'll see here, we want to map the blog post to a preview and link element. So actually, okay. I'm going to try and blaze through this fairly quick, just since we're a little bit behind. Let's see. So what we're going to do below this is we're going to go ahead and list all of our information, right? First thing we need to do is query all of our blog posts, though. So to do that, we're just going to get something similar to our previous query. So what we're going to do is if we go ahead and come to the blog page again, we can copy this query here and paste this at the bottom in the index file. And we're going to do some modification to this. So we get all MDX rather than just this specific one file, right? So I'm going to make a few edits. First thing we're going to do is delete any mention of the slug. So you can go ahead and delete this parentheses up top by blog page and this parentheses and bracket stuff here by MDX. Next thing we're going to do is change this to blog query. Just so we have a different name. This isn't really necessary, but I recommend it. And then we're going to change MDX to all MDX. And then we're going to have to add another field to this. called nodes, since we have multiple MDX files. And I'm just going to go ahead and wrap that around here. And then I'm going to go ahead and tab this all out. I don't believe you have to do this, but if you want to, you can just go ahead and add a tab from fields all the way down to here at the end of front matter, just so that way it lines up a bit better. Then we're going to do a few things. First thing we're going to do is go ahead and get our excerpt. So this is going to be a short summarization of our text. We're going to do excerpt and then prune length 250. So what this does is it says we're going to go ahead and get some of our text and cut it off at 250 characters. And then we're going to go down here to child image sharp, Gatsby image data. We're going to add a little more information. So first off, I'm going to break this into its own set of lines. So it looks like this. First thing we're going to do is change the layout to constrained. This will make it so the image is kept within an element rather than trying to take up the full width of the page. Then we're going to change placeholder to dominant color. This will allow us to load the page much faster. So instead of just showing a low res image, it's actually just going to show one color from the image and then load it in. This is optional. You don't have to do that, but. And then two very important ones we're going to do, just so we have a uniform style across the website. We're going to set our width to 368 pixels, like that. And then we're going to set our aspect ratio to 1.777. So that's just 16:9. That's your average resolution on a monitor. I just picked this so that way, if you take pictures with your camera or something, for example, it lines up, right? I'm going to go ahead and save that. So we have our query. And we're going to go up here. Now, to quickly run through this, we're going to go off of our data and map this into these blog preview links, which we can use to actually link directly to our blog posts. So I'm going to do open brackets. We're going to do data dot, oh, sorry, we need to import data here at the top in these parentheses. So where it says const index page equals, and then parentheses here, we're actually going to add two curly brackets and then put data in there. So that way we're importing it just like we did with our blog post. Then we're going to do data dot blog posts dot nodes dot map, or sorry, instead of blog posts, all MDX. And what that'll do is it'll come down to this query. We're going to get all of our MDX files, all of our nodes, and then we're going to start mapping them into links. So we're going to do the same thing as before, post, and then arrow. And then this time we're going to do parentheses instead of brackets. And I'm just going to kind of go through this fairly quickly. We're a little bit behind on time, so I apologize if you can't keep up. Just go ahead and take pictures if you need to. But we'll also publish the source code for all of this at some point in the future. We're going to do key equals post.fields.slug. This will basically say each individual link is unique and uses the slug that we created, the page URL, to identify itself. And then we're just going to copy this and paste it. And we're going to make it the href. So reason being, this blog preview is an A element, which means it's a link in HTML. We're going to go ahead and make all of these previews links that go to the blog page. And then we'll just go ahead and close that. Next, we're going to put our thumbnail, which is also imported. We're going to do image equals, and then we're going to do, this is a long string, I apologize, post dot front matter dot image dot child image sharp dot Gatsby image data. If you need to copy any of this, like I mentioned, it's in that query string at the bottom, so I would just grab it there. And then alt, like before, we need this for our accessibility. Post dot fields, or sorry, post dot front matter dot title. And then we'll set a class name of blog thumbnail. And then we're going to go ahead and create a div. Like I mentioned, this is kind of just our basic building block for containing things. And then we're going to put in our title. I'll just put an H2 here, and we'll do post.frontmatter.title. And then we're just going to copy this 3 times. The second one, we're going to change to an H3, so it's slightly smaller. And we're going to change this to be post.frontmatter.date. And then we're going to set our excerpt here, which we imported through GraphQL, to post.excerpt. So if I go ahead and save this, it's not going to look pretty at all because we need to do a little bit of styling to get this working. So I'm going to blaze through this. If we go to our blog preview.js within components, core, blog preview. Since we're running low on time, I'm just going to cover the desktop view so we can be a little quick. First thing we're going to do is add a margin. And we're going to do 2 rem and then 0. What this does is it adds spacers to the top and bottom of the blog post, so that way you have room in between them. Then we're going to do display flex, and we're going to set our flex direction to row. And what this will do is basically allow us to display items side by side rather than top and bottom like we currently have here. So the image will be on the left and this text will be on the right. And then we're going to do align items center. If I go ahead and save that, you'll notice that this looks a little bit better, but it's not perfect, right? So we're going to do just a tiny bit more styling to get this exactly how we want it. I'm going to go over here to thumbnail, and we're going to go ahead and set up a margin right of 2 rem, a width of 25 VW. What this means is viewport width, basically how wide your browser window is. That's 25%, so it's not like taking up the whole screen, right? Then we're going to set the max width to 368 pixels. So that way, even if your screen is like super wide, it's not super huge. And then the height to 100%. Okay. And you'll notice that now we have a much better looking link. This looks a lot more like what you would expect from a blog. You have your image, you have your title, date, and then a little bit summary of what is contained within that blog post, right? And the good thing about this is if I go ahead and go to our example post and I just copy this over and over, if I go back here, you'll notice that it actually expands that information so that it displays as much of that summary as possible. So I'll go ahead and just undo that for now. So you'll notice now that we've done this, we're able to actually click an individual post. And it goes ahead and it loads here. And you'll still have all that information from before. You can go ahead and click back. And this is just the cached version because Google Chrome saved it. If I go ahead and refresh, you'll notice it comes back up. We can do the same thing. And now it's working. So we have our very, very basic blog set up here. So yeah. And then one last thing I'm just going to add so that way we can get back without having to hit this back button. If I go ahead and close these. This is totally optional. You don't have to do this, but I recommend it. What I do, or what I did, is I went ahead and put another spacer here. And then I went ahead and put a paragraph with a link back to slash, which basically represents the root of our domain. So we can just get back to that index page where we have all the blog posts linked. And then we're going to do return to home page, like so. Now you'll notice at the bottom here, past our markdown file that's been rendered, we have this return to home page button. So I know I kind of had to blow through everything at the end there. Sorry, this went a bit long. I did some testing on my own, but I didn't really account for people asking questions. But does anybody have any questions about what I've worked on today? Like I mentioned, we'll try and provide a recording, and then the full source code will be available so you can catch up on anything you missed. Everybody good? All right. So I will go ahead and go through the remainder of our slides. So in conclusion, what we've worked on today, we installed Node.js, which is that JavaScript server-side engine. We've installed NPM, which allows us to manage our packages, so things like Gatsby, React, and then we've installed other dependencies to make those React-based websites. We learned how to use GraphQL with Gatsby to statically generate websites using our markdown files. And then we've assembled a blog that you can really use for whatever you'd like if you expand upon it in the future. You could build a portfolio, some personal writings, and many, many more with just those template components that I've provided you. You could build upon those, make it look however you want on your own, or even add additional things. So just to kind of show you an example that I've made with a lot more time, this is my personal website. You can see I have like a projects list here, and I've got like sorts, different like, you can choose which ones you want to see. And then I've got different projects listed here, and you'll notice it's pretty much the same as what we just worked on. We've got image, title, a little excerpt, and then a date down there. I've just added a lot more like CSS styling and made it look fancy, right? So I really want to cover what you can do from here as well. So one thing I highly recommend, add a little bit more style to your site. Obviously, this is very basic. This is just like learning the basics of React, right? I haven't gone through like how does CSS styling work? How does HTML work as a whole, right? This was supposed to be like a very basic overview of how you can generate these websites using React and do something unique. So things you could do, you could add like a nav bar at the top. You could add a footer. If you want to have like more information at the bottom, like a copyright or extra links to like social media. You could change the fonts and colors. You could improve the styles on mobile, which we'll have on our complete source code. You can add extra markdown info. So if you want to add like an author name or you want to add like a stack that you used for a project, you can do that there. You can also get your site embed ready. So if you look up like how to get meta tags on your website, you can set it up. So if you send like, for example, your blog URL to somebody on Discord, it'll pop up with like an image, the name, a description of your blog, stuff like that. And this is a little example of like additional information I've added to my markdown pages. So you can see I have like my position on a project, the stack I followed, the organization I was in, etc. Some other things you can do that's a little more technical. One thing I didn't really cover in this is React hooks. So hooks are basically how you can control variables from the React front end. They are very, very important for interactive apps. So if you want to do something like sorting, you'll definitely want to use a hook for that. So you could use like a use state and a dropdown to like save a sorting method and use that. So for example, if you wanted to sort like your blog posts by their date or their alphabetical order, and then really the sky is the limit. So if you want to learn like how to make 3D animations using React Refiber, if you want to like create fun CSS animations, so if you hover over something, it does a little shine effect. If you want to work on like an about section or something that doesn't use Markdown, just like a completely separate page, there's a lot that you can do at this point. So highly, highly recommend. If you didn't complete the code here, just download the source code. Once it's provided, I'll be providing that in the UT Design Makerspace Discord, hopefully. And you'll be able to sort of work from there to continue building that blog if you'd like. So does anybody have any questions about what we learned today or any information about the packages we used? I know I kind of ran through it quick at the end. So.
Oh.
Sure. So there's a lot of them. There's Vite, for example, which is pretty good for interactive applications. Next.js is another good one for like static websites, in my opinion. Gatsby, like I mentioned, is just static site generation as well. There's a whole lot of these different React frameworks that you can really look at, and each of them kind of has their own use case. If you really want to get started with like a simple interactive app, you could just use something like Create React App, which is available online. That's just like a super easy starter template. But yeah, really getting into the frameworks is like a bit more complex. You don't have to do that for like your first few projects, but it's something that's kind of good to look into just so you have more like options.
Give me opinion on you.
Yeah, I've heard of Vue before. I've looked at some code in it, but I'm not like I'm not super well versed in it. So, anybody else? All right, cool. So, just going to blow through our upcoming workshops, and then I'll go ahead and open up the resume review. So, upcoming workshops, we have automating browser testing with Jest. That will be on Tuesday, February 27th at 7 p.m., taught by Will. He's a QA engineer at Repairify. Then we'll also have deploying apps to the cloud with Docker. That will be taught by another member of my team at Repairify on Tuesday, March 26th at 7 p.m. And then I want to reiterate, a lot of these workshops will share these things in common. So we'll have a similar tone and structure with just sort of basic app that you sort of build upon, learn more skills with them. This was really the complicated one where you're just doing a lot of like building and manual code. The other one should hopefully not be as like stressful and quick coding. We'll use the same code that we developed today. Like I mentioned, we'll also publish the source code if you want to use that. These will be taught by UT Dallas alumni, so we're familiar with the campus, different student organizations and whatnot. There'll be a resume review after the workshop each time, hopefully, and we'll try and have another online option available. All right. So thank you to everybody for coming and sticking it out until the end. I know we have a little bit of time until 9 o'clock, but I think a few of us will be here for like a while to do resume reviews. So if anybody brought your resumes, feel free to come up to us and get those reviewed. I'll be hanging around the front. I'm sure we can all come up front here if that works. And we also have some swag and giveaways if you want to come by and pick one of those up. So yeah, thank you for coming.